Welcome to Evan the Counselor Live. I'm Evan the Counselor. At least I think this is Evan the Counselor Live. We're doing a little experiment today. This is called the TikTok Love Line. And basically, I am living a dream that I had since childhood. Although, I don't know if I necessarily had this dream to do it myself in childhood. That may have come a little bit later, but I always grew up watching shows and listening to shows really on the radio, like Loveline, which I absolutely loved at the time and probably still do. And it wasn't until later on when I was in grad school that my friend Lily and I, and you may know Lily from episode 1, Lily the social worker, I call her, and we had this idea of doing a sex, love, relationship advice podcast. And we were going to call it The Blind Leading the Blind, right? So that never quite materialized, though I would still do that with her if she had the time or the will. So I always wanted to do this, and now that I have the platform that I do, I figure why not? So this is a bit of an experiment, and I thought, well, hey, doing it on one of my TikTok live streams, and I even made a video, didn't quite do so well, but sometimes that's just how it goes, and I may still keep doing it anyway because I like it. But I thought, hey, let's do it on the live stream, almost make it like a radio show. So basically, if you're listening to this on audio form, you could watch this on YouTube, although it's not that much more exciting. But I put a green screen background that just said TikTok Love Line, ask me your relationship and romance questions. So as people came in the live stream, they were asking some awesome questions. And honestly, I thought this went really well. I think it was nice having a focused topic because for those of you who go into my lives, I could be a little bit all over the place. And for people who have followed me for a while, I think that's kind of the fun. But I thought this was awesome to have it a little bit more focused and record it and make it a podcast. So we had some awesome questions. We covered some great topics. So here are some of the topics we covered. Manipulative dating practices and should you do them? Dating when you are struggling with addiction or if you have a partner struggling with addiction. Dating in your 50s, when to introduce your kids to a boyfriend, girlfriend, or partner. Dating when you have borderline personality disorder, and when to tell your partner you have struggle with mental health or chemical dependency, or really if you have any skeletons in your closet, when to disclose. Dating anxiety and how to combat that. Someone had cold feet before a marriage, and what could that be about? Pros and cons of monogamy or non-monogamy, my favorite topic probably. And this one I think was awesome towards the end, and that is once a cheater, always a cheater. Is that true? So if you want to hear my thoughts on these topics and much, much more, keep listening. I thought this went well. I'd love to hear your feedback. Also, feel free to send me an email or even a voice recording, and maybe on the next show I will feature your question. So go ahead and do that. I really hope you enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun. Until then, we'll see you next time. Oh, and somehow I almost forgot that at the end of this, we're doing everyone's new favorite segment and potentially my own called Bad Advice. I'm so used to having to give good advice all the time that I decided, hey, why not do a segment where we do bad advice and usually hilarity ensues. So do not miss that. Stick around to the end if you want to hear bad advice. All right, folks, welcome to Evan the Counselor Live. However, today it's a little different. We're going to be doing our first episode of the TikTok Love Line. That's right, we're bringing it back, new generation. We don't have Corolla and Drew, it's just me. Maybe we'll get some more people. But yeah, for my millennials who know about Loveline, grew up on that. So I thought we'd do a little play on that. I've always wanted to do like an advice show. So feel free, anyone who's in here. Right now we are live on TikTok. We got anywhere between 40, 50 people. We're just getting started. And we already have a couple questions coming in. So if anyone wants, throw in your questions about dating, romance, sex, whatever it is. And maybe if you have other questions, we'll throw those in as well. See if we can go for about an hour. And let's get going. First, we have Nick in Ohio. Why does it seem like I always go for broken women? And so I was just on here with Nick a little bit, and I asked him, all right, tell me a little more. And he says, I have issues with alcohol, and it seems like I'm attracted to women with relationship issues. So, I mean, this is the classic tale, right, of the alcoholic and, I'm not saying for sure in this case, but the codependent, right? A lot of folks who have relationship issues or find themselves always trying to fix people in that codependent state often tend to get attracted to folks who are struggling with alcohol and perhaps need fixing. There's an element of attachment here. There's an element of also like chasing, right? It's like for whatever reason, I don't know if it's abandonment or whatever the psychology is behind that. But it's often like empathetic people who are maybe overly empathetic, who are trying to fix other people. And they are attracted to somebody who is broken, and it becomes almost a game, or it becomes like an obsession, right? A codependency like is a form of addiction. So the alcoholic and the codependent go hand in hand. So Nick, like if you find that you're in an unhealthy place, like with your alcohol use, it's likely that you are going to attract unhealthy people. Or a lot of times, I think there's a logical fallacy where it's like, why do I always attract people who are unhealthy, narcissistic, alcoholics? But sometimes it's important to stop to ask yourself, why am I attracted to them? Right? It's often the opposite way around. It's like there's other people who are hovering around you and probably attracted to you, but you kind of skip over them, right? So that when you're in that unhealthy place, you find someone else in an unhealthy place that matches up pretty well to your unhealth. Some call it trauma bonding, is a fancy way of putting it nowadays. But yeah, the alcoholic, the stereotypical alcoholic and codependent very much attract each other, right? And maybe being in that unhealthy place, some of the healthy women kind of see that and they view that as a red flag when you are in an unhealthy place with alcohol. So they're just not as interested. However, the folks that are more typically codependent, that may very much well be the case. But Nick, thank you so much. Hope you get some work done on that alcohol. And yeah, see if you get some help. Usually I recommend folks, to start off with an assessment. I do have a video on my YouTube about, the first steps to take when struggling with alcohol. And one of the first ones is getting an assessment with a licensed professional. Pretty much every state has, a license or certification for alcohol and drug counseling, and they will be able to tell you some options, because there is a huge spectrum of options, from doing just some therapy and working on cutting back to I need to go to detox right now because I have dangerous withdrawals that could kill me. And also medical is a big component. When coming off alcohol, it is very dangerous, depending on how much you drink. So it's always good to seek some doctor attention. And there are some good meds to help you come off alcohol. So if that's something you're interested in, go check out that video. I'm doing good, Deb. We got B. Okay, let's see. Got some questions rolling in for our first pilot show. Okay, so this was an interesting one. Okay, I'm using the Ghost 3 days active and 1 off. And then I asked a little more. He goes, I give 0 attention for 3 days and then give a ton 1. Right? And I was saying, okay, well, why do you do that? And someone else is here saying that's game playing. And that is, right? There's, that would be playing off of what we call intermittent reinforcement, right? And that is a more powerful way of shaping someone's behavior. If you just give them reinforcement every time they do something you want, right? And this is like principles of dog training. You will shape behavior. However, if you do that on an intermittent schedule, that does, so I think there is a lot of kind of toxic advice out there. I would call it like the dark arts. It's like stuff that like might work, but there's probably consequences for doing that, right? And, so I would probably steer away from, I think there's a difference between strategy, because I think nowadays, dating is really tough, and, sometimes you can step on some landmines and get filtered out, or whatever that may be, if you don't take a more strategic approach. And times are changing, and online dating is the nature of that is changing, and it's a different playing field. So, but I do think there is a difference between manipulation and, being strategic in how you approach dating. And I think it is okay to learn, to get some advice. And there's my dating coach buddy, Evan, on here. The other Evan, I recommend you checking out. Performance Potential. He's pretty brutally honest, but he's got some good advice, so, for guys. And women, too. He works with a lot of women. So, yes, game playing. Okay, so coming back to our drink and friend, he says, thanks, it makes a lot of sense. Been in your lives before. We've gone through the legal aspect. And we'll see what else comes out of him. So I find it hard to meet people, date, small talk, or even ordering a coffee. Always get anxiety. All right. Yeah, I mean, dating, what could be more vulnerable than dating, right? It's like you're putting yourself out there. You're, showing, you're revealing some of your deepest insecurities. And that could be from your past. It could be your body. I think everyone has insecurities about their body. And sometimes the people with the best bodies have some of the most insecurity, which is kind of interesting. But and by best bodies, I mean, stereotypically, what society deems attractive in general. And remember, beauty and physical attractiveness is always in the eye of the beholder. And I do mean that. People have very different tastes. Anyway, I digress. I just definitely went on a huge tangent. But coming back to the anxiety, right? So that's another reason why there's sometimes a lot of anxiety around dating. You're putting yourself in a place to get potentially rejected. You're putting yourself in a place where you may be heartbroken. And not just that, it's often likely. It's like nobody has dated, and not nobody. There's, high school sweethearts who get married and whatever, but it certainly isn't perfect. But, there's always vulnerability. There's always risk. There's always fear. Is that person going to leave me? Are they going to cheat on me, right? So there's so much anxiety that goes into the dating process. So that totally makes sense. The only thing I could say is there's just a couple. When I have clients in this space, there's like a few different things we talk about, right? And it comes down to motivation and ambivalence, right? Because it's like part of me wants to get back out there and date, and the other part of me is afraid, right? So it's like that desire has to become more than the fear. And sometimes we'll do some like exercises in motivational enhancement of like, okay, imagine what would happen if you kept up this avoidance, right? What would that look like if you continue this for a year? And I do this with all sorts of things, not just dating, not just anxiety, whether it's drinking. Okay, what would that look like 3 years from now if you kept doing exactly what you were doing? And usually that's not good, right? It's like I would for sure be alone because I'm not dating, right? And it's like, what are your goals? What are your values? Why is it that you even have that desire to date, right? So really talking about that and enhancing that motivation, because you need just enough of that to get out of your comfort zone. And that's what anxiety is being, anxiety often leads to avoidance, which is then being boxed in your comfort zone. And the more you stay within that small comfort zone, the comfort zone stays the same size or gets even smaller the more you avoid. Sometimes you may have had a larger comfort zone and maybe you had more confidence, but there's something that ruined your confidence, right? It could be a bad relationship. It could be a variety of things that could take your confidence away. So wherever you are in that spectrum, it's important to start getting out of your comfort zone little by little. Because I know that by asking that, you want to get out there, you want to meet somebody. But the thing is, there's no magic bullet. It's like you have to take that risk. And it's scary. It is definitely scary. But again, it's kind of the better to love and lost than never have loved at all, right? You got to take a few bumps before the right one's going to come along. And then you get used to it. It's it's going to be tough, but in the end of the day, it's taking steps towards what you want, and not just like for the outcome of okay, I'm going to find a boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever. It could just be that hey, this is a good way for you to challenge your anxiety, and that's gonna generalize to other areas. So I appreciate that question because, yeah, you did say that it was other areas where you get anxiety as well. Um, let's see. Do you think people who have abusive past tend to lean towards abusive relationships? Yeah, it is. It is familiarity. It is a desire to um, seek what is comfortable, what is normal, and sometimes what is comfortable and normal is putting yourself in these situations that are abusive. Um, yeah, again, it's like no matter what, whether it's good or bad, we seek that familiarity, and that's why you see so many people getting trapped into those cycles of abuse where they've witnessed it growing up. Some people take the opposite, but I think it's more common um, to do that. And I think that sometimes folks who've had very specific types of abuse, sexual abuse, tend to there is this element of like recreation, and it's like almost this subconscious way of trying to make sense of your experience and putting yourself in. Now, look, some people actually are able, and this kind of sounds crazy to a lot of people, but some people are able to take control of that, right? And find someone who's safe, but be able to explore some of those like darker side of things, but in a safe, healthy way, right? Through like things like kink. Um, and that could be really powerful, and you'd think it's very counterintuitive, like, well, you definitely should not do that if you had trauma to like go down that road. But a lot of and the thing too, it is so deep, like a lot of women and men who have had, it's so common, who have had sexual abuse tend to be more turned on, I mean, in the most kind of visceral sense, to those same experiences. And you would think it would be completely the opposite. But sometimes it's so innate that literally they are getting more turned on by 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 actions that are by dynamics, by experiences that closely resemble the traumatic experience that they had, right? And then those folks feel a ton of shame because they're like, oh my God, why am I getting turned on by things that are literally recreations of the abuse I experienced? I spend all this time trying to not think about it, trying to avoid it. It's affecting my life so negatively, but then all of a sudden I'm turned on by this, right? You could see why there'd be a lot of cognitive dissonance. So a lot of people don't know that, hey, that actually may be okay, but you want to be safe about it too. So that's a really good question. So there's a lot of reasons for that. Great question. Um, Hey, E. That's our friend Eric E. Blade. We are doing the love line. Eric, if you have any questions, let me know. Although you know probably not to listen to me. You know better than these other folks. Eric's one of my real life buddies. Um, oh, yeah, so a little follow up here. It's like they start the convos, and yes, the glorious manipulation. So maybe that was in regards to the intermittent reinforcement. What up, Jeff? Jeff always just swoops into the lives. We'll see what he has. Sophia says, very true about the kink. Yeah, it is very common. Almost, I don't know for sure, but I would guess almost more the rule than the exception in a lot of cases. However, with sexual trauma, of course, there's plenty of examples of, being very avoidant. And maybe you still have those desires or are avoidant too, so there's a lot of possibilities. Sophie says, this is my struggle, been dealing with this. And yeah, what I'd say is, like, maybe you just need permission. Maybe you just need to know that that's normal and that it's not necessarily unhealthy, and that there are a lot of people out there, like in the kink community, who are able to do this in a safe way, to find a safe person and be able to, they call them like scenes, right? To go into these scenes. It's like game playing, it's like drama class, right? You're doing a scene. That's what they refer to it in that community. But you're able to, partake in some of these scenes where you're going there. You're going to that place. But you could always pull out, no pun intended, when, if it is feeling a little too much. How soon should I tell someone I have BPD? Oh, that is an amazing question. I definitely not on date one, I think it's safe to say. It really depends. I think sometimes when it feels, you got to like check your intuition a bit, when it feels natural. And it kind of depends on, and I guess I would throw this out to you, Denver Don. I figured it out. Denver Don. Where are you at in the process? Like, have you gotten therapy around it? Do you feel like you're in a healthy place, or maybe you're still struggling and needing to get a little more support in that area? So I think it depends on that too. Like for example, I don't. I'm someone who's openly in recovery, so it's like, well, when do I tell folks that? Now, granted, I've been personally sober at this point, 14 years, so it's a little easier for me to say that because it's like I'm so far gone from that it may not seem like a huge risk, and there's a lot of and there's a lot more nowadays accepting. People are more accepting of recovery. With BPD, there is a lot of stigma now. A lot of people, probably most people, don't know what that is. We're on mental health TikTok, so probably most of you know what that is. But I guess we could explain borderline personality disorder for those who don't know. It is a disorder of emotional regulation, attachment, trouble in relationships, sometimes trouble with, like I said, emotional reactivity, anger, acting out in risky behaviors. It's often a trauma response, but it is part, ingrained in one's personality, right? It's like kind of folks who tend to be a little more sensitive, sprinkle some trauma, and it becomes a reaction to severe stress and trauma. So how soon should you tell them? Now, I think it depends on the person. Now, if this is someone that's, kind of woke to mental health, and they know a lot about it, or maybe, they have a family member and they've had, a close relationship. So it really just depends on the person. Now, as you start to get, deeper into the relationship and they start to share more intimate things about them, and you start getting to that stage, then when you start to feel a little more comfortable, maybe you don't want to wait until you're like 6 months in, about to move in together or something like that. But look, could it be okay on the first date? Maybe under very rare circumstances, like, if someone, you start just talking about mental health and they start sharing about them. And so you could kind of feel that out, and you could tell, hey, maybe this is a safe person to tell that to, who's not going to run. Still, probably not on the first date, right? And it just really depends on the person. But I hope that helps. I do think when you boil it down, it's just your own comfort. I didn't want to bring men around my daughter, and I'm used to being alone. That is from, I shouldn't have worn this light of a shirt, listener. So what is the context there? I didn't want to bring men around my daughter. Okay, I think, yeah, she was the one who was experiencing anxiety. And that's another great question. You didn't specifically ask that. But, that's another question is, well, when do I bring men around my daughter? And maybe, it's not, I think it isn't appropriate for a while until you know that, hey, this is getting really serious. And I'm sure your daughter doesn't want to meet a whole bunch of randos. But yeah, hold on. Someone's trying to get in the live here. Let's see where we're at. Yeah, so when do we tell folks, or when do we introduce folks to a significant other after divorce, or single motherhood, fatherhood? But yeah, when there's 16 too, that's a bit older, and so there's maybe a little bit less confusion, and hopefully your daughter would be more understanding that mama's got some needs, and I'm sure she probably wants you to find someone as well. But especially as she's older, I'm sure she doesn't want to be home every single night. That maybe there's a night she's out with her friends, and when it gets to that point in the relationship, when you're bringing them home, maybe the guy has his own place and you could go there for a while. Because at some point, it's like in a relationship, it's like the couple decides, like there's like the home base. So it's either your place or their place that becomes like the go-to hangout spot. So maybe in that case, it will be their place. I don't even know how to date. I divorced in my 30s and raised my daughter for 16 years. Now I'm 50. Yeah. The landscape has changed since then, for good and for bad. The bad is, well, the good and the bad are kind of in the same thing, as like there are more opportunities to meet people. online, and that, and a lot of people have had successful online relationships. You're able to meet people who generally you wouldn't come across, right? However, sometimes having an abundance of options can lead to a problem, probably especially more with younger people. And, given that you were dating in a time back when things were, quote, normal, I think a lot of older folks, it's not like they're going on Tinder and going on multiple dates. I mean, there's an element of maturity there. But there are, sites for older folks, geared towards older folks. And a lot of the regular dating sites have folks that are older. I mean, you could set age and, and just see who's out there and start chatting. You don't have to, start going on dates. I would just recommend, if you're in that place, to be honest with people online and tell them, hey, maybe I'm not ready to start meeting up, but I just want to chat with some people. And once you feel comfortable, go get some coffee. Don't go to their house on the first date. Really build the comfort zone, I think, is the best practice. But then when you're ready, start meeting up with folks. Do something casual. Go, think about it as having fun. Don't put too much pressure on the situation. You're not in a hurry. I don't think you're wanting to have more kids or anything like that. So you kind of have that on your side too, where you're not in a rush. You have ADHD, but I'm also depressed. It's hard to do things and I feel stuck. Any suggestions? Well, it's one of those things where I hope you're, getting some help and therapy for that. Working on being healthier, working on, fighting your depression, working on, finding some skills, things that will help with depression. And, the ADHD can fit in a variety of different ways. But, again, it's kind of similar to anxiety. It's just like taking little steps, challenging yourself, get out of your comfort zone. And I think before you start, jumping in, maybe working on that. It sounds like that may be the way to go, to start working on yourself. Because when you start like dating and you're not in that healthy place, again, you're maybe not going to attract the right people, not going to be attracted to the right people, or the people who should, could, and would be attracted to you may not, may pick up on that energy when you're not in the place. So, just spend some time, work on yourself, work on those, I'm guessing this isn't the first time this has happened, and, do what's worked for you in the past. And it's a hard time. Working with a lot of folks right now, and it's winter, and, there's less sunlight. I guess it depends on where you're at. Maybe you're in Ecuador or something. Let's see. I've gone through the legal aspect of therapy. Counseling is what I was saying in the last comment. Okay. Oh, through the legal aspect. I'm not sure exactly. All right, let's see. Let's get a fresh question. Do you feel that people with an abusive past tend to lead towards abusive relationships? Okay, so you missed that earlier, but we did dive deep into that, and I guess just the short answer there would be yes. We often are attracted to familiarity. And we also talked about before how that could translate sexually as well, and that is okay. It is important to know that it is okay. All right, let's see. All right, we just took a big... All right, some inappropriate comments, all right, about choking and me. I'm in Sweden. It's dark 24/7. Yes, the duck, Scandinavia. How is it that Scandinavians report being so damn happy, yet it's so dark all the time? Can I ask you something related to this? Of course, you can ask me anything. I may or may not answer. What are your thoughts on dating apps, free or paid? I think it depends. I think it depends on your demographic. I think there's positive and negatives to both. I think like the paid apps, what's pretty clearly an advantage is that people are going to be more serious. So it kind of depends what you're looking for. If you're kind of open and, you're not necessarily like laser focused on a relationship. But yeah, I think both could be good. And especially if you're like upfront about your intentions and saying, hey, I'm looking for a relationship, or I'm looking for a relationship or something casual. Also probably depends what type of area you're into. So I don't know. Most of the apps now are like have a free or paid feature. But then there's some, like Match.com or, and those tend to be people who are like much more serious about a relationship. So I think if you're a little more laser focused on that, it's worth trying. And the free ones are free, so hey, shit, why not try it? So that is dating apps. Men in recovery often deal with ED as a result of hypogonadism, and I don't know how it can be treated. Interesting. I've never heard of that. So hypogonadism. So usually if something is hypo, that means less of. So I don't know if that means testicular shrinking, and I've never heard of that. But there's a lot of reasons why people in recovery may deal with erectile dysfunction. But honestly, I mean, nowadays there are some very, well trotted out treatments, multiple different medications, and some of those could be pretty damn powerful. So, like, you could be like 90, like on your deathbed, and take some of those pills, and you'll be pitching a tent in the bed with those sheets real quick. Anyways, yeah, there's that. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is those meds could be very effective. But I don't know. Again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know if you have that condition, and they're like, well, no, you can't take. But there's different the ED meds that work in different ways. So maybe there's one that's better for another. But you could see your general practitioner. You can see your a urologist would be someone who specializes in that area too. But, until you figure out the underlying issue. But until then, you got those meds. All right. Let's see. Any more love questions? All right, we're talking about some EMDR trauma therapies, and we could relate that for those folks who are, finding themselves geared towards those abusive relationships based on their past. All right. It's been a pain since I'm in disability. But thank you for the answers. You're in CBT now for PTSD, second session. That is awesome. You got your heart rate up to 120, so it sounds like you got a good workout in as well. But you took that first step, and now it should be a little less scary. It gets a little easier from there. How can I work on being too dependent from people? Just met my cousin. I always want to see him. Okay. I'm going to assume that it is a friendship with your cousin. We're just going to go with that and not read too much into that. But let's just talk about the general topics of dependence on other people. So there's different ways, which before we talked about codependency. And usually behind any of these extremes, as far as like any type of addiction, dependency, codependency, there's something underlying, right? It's like we all have, insecurities in a different way. We all have means of negative coping. And sometimes, it's like, what's our drug of choice? And sometimes that's people, right? So you treat that like you would anything else, like in a therapy sense. But usually when it comes to relationships, there's usually some underlying dynamics, usually always some kind of trauma, negative, adverse experience in relationships. And some people are just geared towards more person dependence, but when it becomes extreme, there's usually some negative adverse experiences under that. So how do you recognize, identify those, building motivation, recognizing how that is damaging, doing more focus on yourself, learning to enjoy your own company more, right? So you don't feel like you always have to be seeking other people. Those are some of the ones. Okay, so this is interesting. Okay, the BPD question. So this is our same. Oh, this is Detroit Tracker. So the BPD question made me think: how do you tell that you have a DV conviction one day? Now that's a tough one. I mean, and that is complicated nowadays. Like, you got to say it at some point, not just for moral reasons. There's definitely that, but you have to, like anyone could find anything on the internet nowadays, and that's tough. And that's scary too, because you're like, oh my God, like what if I get rejected? But I think after, a few dates maybe, I don't know, maybe some people here to disagree, and, that's a really sensitive issue. But look, I've worked with, clients who have had, let's just say offenses that have to put them on a registry, right? Who, I don't want to get too triggering here, but you probably know where I'm getting at. But yeah, so with offenses that I've had to put them on a registry and be in a program, and they want to go back out and date too. And, my views have evolved on this, with these types of offenders where sometimes they do get better. And sometimes, folks deserve a second chance and they want better for themselves. And, they want a relationship. And sometimes I'm shocked at how understanding people are. Like I'd be like, oh my God, I don't know who's going to be okay with that. But, a lot of times maybe people shouldn't be as accepting of these things that they are, but that may bode well for you. And I'm not saying that you don't deserve that, because look, with DV, with domestic violence, it isn't always as cut and dry. Now, sometimes it is, and it's like, you got an extremely abusive partner, but, usually there is, a cycle that goes with it, in a toxic relationship. It's usually a toxic relationship cycle. And so sometimes not every situation is cut and dry, and sometimes folks, I gotta be careful what I say here, but sometimes there are, I don't want to say like false accusations, but I mean sometimes there's that. Sometimes it's like you're getting in a fight, you're both drunk, and the cops are just sick of it, so they press charges anyway. Or someone is mad at you, you press charges, and it doesn't matter if you're male, female. I mean, I've seen this work both ways. So sometimes, I don't know your situation, but I think there is some room for understanding. But that is a tricky one. When do you disclose that I've been I've been arrested, I've got DUIs, I have DV, and again, that's the worst case I've, heard in those situations of I'm on a certain type of registry. So that's tough, but I think, after a handful of dates, maybe, if things start to get serious. And I think it's always better too. And look, and maybe I'd love to hear what you all think about this too. Let's say you were dating someone you really liked and they had a bit of a checkered past, right? A serious felony, a domestic violence, or we were talking about here, when do you disclose if you have like a mental illness, right? That one's a little different. These are all different dynamics in a way, but when would you want to hear about it, right? Like right away. Let's say you like this person. Let's say that they, were genuinely, on a better path. When would you want to find out? Because, what ends up getting you in trouble is when you don't say anything and 6 months later they find out. I think, like, when you're honest about it, it kind of diffuses the situation a bit, or, it disarms a little bit versus them finding out. Because if they don't find out, one of their friends is. How many of your friends have, like, Googled guys, while you're dating them and didn't want to drop the bad news about their past? All right, let's see what else. We got some more questions coming in. I'm very impulsive when I talk to people. I feel like I tell them too much. Yeah, so sometimes, that comes out of anxiety. It's like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm talking and I can't stop myself. And oh my God, I just disclosed that. So that's a tough one. I mean, but I think my guess is, there may be some anxiety under that and you're like oversharing. So the question is, why is that? That's a good one though. And yeah, so for anyone who's just joining, anyone who's not been here before, I've seen a few familiar faces, but for the most part, a lot of you folks look a little bit newer in the game. But feel free to shoot me an email. My email is evan@evanthecounselor.com. The link is in my bio. And I just ask that you shoot out an email, and I will give you some free resources. So these are guides that I do with my clients that you could do that you may find helpful. And I give them away for free. So if you're interested, all you got to do is shoot me that email. The only thing I ask in return is that you sub to any of my other socials. I have a YouTube, Insta, podcast. If you subscribe to all three, I'll give you 3 free guides. And I have a new podcast out right now with some of you may know him as Distilled Science. That is Avisha of Distilled Science. He is a COVID scientist researcher. And we had an amazing conversation that went 3 hours, all about the pandemic and misinformation, and from a really, really sharp guy who knows what he's talking about. So go check that out, and I got a bunch of other episodes for you new folks. So feel free. I want to see a couple emails coming in here from you guys so I could give those out. Um, oh, you were thinking about the impact on mental health with the dating apps. Um, let's see. What was your original message? So you were saying, anyways. Well, you could talk about that for a little bit. Oh, and Rena's here too, one of our friends. But yeah, I think there could be there's a lot of that ties into dating apps and mental health, and I think it's easy to go overboard on them. I think it's easy to have, almost being paralyzed with too many options. It could be overwhelming. I think a lot of people get burned out. They get a little jaded on the apps. So I think there's some best practices to reduce that, but that is very real, and I think it is getting worse and worse. Um, yes, John, this is the TikTok love line, and we're not doing bad advice, but we could do a little bit of bad advice at the end. So that was a little joke segment we did that turned out to be quite amusing. So anyway, at the end, we will do a little lightning round of bad advice, which is bad advice that you should not follow. All right, what else? Someone asked about poly. I really wish I did not wear this stupid light shirt so I can more easily read this. Just find someone that matches your crazy. There you go. We're talking about that trauma bonding. Where is that poly question? I was waiting for the non-monogamy question. Okay, do you think there's a negative aspect of the popular poly type relationships going on? I love it. Now here, keep this in mind. I'm a little biased on this, but I'll try to be as down the road as I can. With any type of relationship setup, right, there is a positive and a negative. So like polyamory is, I don't want to say like extreme by any means, but it's more further along the spectrum. And on the other end, you have monogamy, right? I'm sure there's always things I've never heard of. Things are changing every day. But, polyamory is, having multiple romantic, and there's maybe other ways of describing this, but romantic relationships with other people, right? It's like I have a husband, I got my husband, my girlfriend's girlfriend, that I'm kind of girlfriends. I got two partners, right? So it could look like a whole bunch of different things. And there's literally an infinite amount of ways to do non-monogamy. With monogamy, it's pretty set as one thing. So you got to ask yourself, okay, so there's monogamy, which is basically no romantic sexual contact outside of me and my partner, right? And then you have everything else, right? And that's a very messy world. And that's where the downside is in polyamory, which is one type of non-monogamy. It's messy, a little messier, right? And messier is not always bad. It's just more complicated. It's a little more tricky to navigate. I always say monogamy is simple, but very difficult. It's like climbing a mountain, like a huge mountain. There's a path, but it's like 10 miles. I don't know if that's possible. Let's just say it's a 10-mile trail up this mountain. It's simple. All you got to do is walk up the mountain versus doing one of those crazy climbing walls, where you're doing overhangs. It's I only got to get up. I don't have to get up as many feet. However, it is really tricky and technical. And that's kind of the downside with maybe a polyamorous relationship, is that it just trickier. There's more situations to navigate, right? But the thing is, there are jealousy in both types of relationships, right? There's jealousy in monogamous relationships. And despite popular opinion, there is jealousy in polyamorous relationships, even though you're open to your partner, but there's still going to be levels of jealousy, even if you're okay with them sleeping with somebody else. What if that partner starts spending all this time and they're getting all excited about them? The thing with polyamory is there's this may be oversimplified, but there's kind of a right way and a wrong way to go about it. And usually the wrong way to go about it is just not doing any homework and just jumping into one of these relationships and just stepping on one of the landmines that is very obviously obvious to other people who have gone down that path. But really, when you boil it down, you have to have better communication skills. Now, you got to have good communication skills for a healthy relationship. With a poly relationship, you got to have those things sharpened big time because you are going to be navigating more tricky issues. But the good thing is there are other people who have done it and been successful. The success rates of monogamy versus non-monogamy are very similar, right? A lot of people think, well, you're more likely to get divorced if you're sleeping around and da-da-da. There's even some studies that show that the STD rates are even pretty equivalent, which I wouldn't even think. But, there's a very good percentage of cheating in monogamous relationships, 20, 30, up to 40%. So it's like a lot of people are monogamous, but they're not doing so well at it, right? So you're getting me on my soapbox about it, but I'll just kind of leave it there because I'm almost giving away all my secrets on polyamory. So if you have any more questions about non-monogamy, that's a great topic to bring up. So yeah, that is awesome. But yes, it is a bit trickier. Oh, okay. I just got a big spike of messages. All right, we did that one with the DV. Have I been successful with dating? We won't go too deep into that one. I've had some success, and I've had some success and a lot of horrible not success. But I think that's kind of how it is. I mean, it's messy until it isn't, especially nowadays with like modern dating. I think it's just a little more complicated. Speaking of complicated, polyamory is difficult if you don't have discipline. Now that is super interesting because again, right, the difficulty of polyamory is like the difficulty of a hard climbing wall, and the difficulty of monogamy is like climbing Mount Everest, right? And granted, there's some tricky stuff on Mount Everest and ice walls you got to climb and stuff, but it's not that tricky. Like you got to stick your finger in a tiny hole and like go over an overhang, like this really technical climbing wall, right? But yes, you do have to have discipline because it's like, well, monogamy, you have to have a ton of discipline too, because it's like, all right, I can't sleep with anyone else. Some people it's easier than others. I mean, there's a lot of people who are very much programmed for monogamy, and that just makes more sense for them. And great. And then there's a lot of people who are definitely programmed for non-monogamy, probably an equal, if not more amount of people. And there's just people in the middle. And most of the people in the middle are just monogamous because they think that's what they're supposed to be, but don't realize that, hey, maybe there's another way that you could do it. Again, it's just trickier. There's more landmines. So there's different types of discipline, right? And the discipline with polyamory is, all right, you've opened up these boundaries. You've opened up the floodgates a little bit with polyamory, but so then it's kind of hard because like, all right, we've opened some boundaries. Now you just have to stay within these boundaries because in a healthy non-monogamous relationship, there are still boundaries. And I think that's one of the misconceptions about non-monogamous relationships is there are no boundaries. Anything goes, free for all. And the people who go into a polyamorous, non-monogamous relationship like that, it's bound to fail. Like it's gonna, like you're going in not knowing, you're going into this tricky territory, not knowing what the hell you're doing. You're gonna step on a landmine for sure. So the difficulty with polyamory is the same kind of difficulty with monogamy, but it's staying within wider boundaries. And the thing is, when you're used to having more freedom, then it's kind of easier to push the boundaries. Whereas with monogamy, it's like this really hard line, right? You know that I cannot cross this, otherwise it's World War III. If I get caught cheating. But then with polyamory, it's like, well, I kind of skirted the boundaries a little bit, but we're still polyamorous. But, that's how those relationships end too. It's all about boundaries. It's just where do you draw the lines? So let's see, any other questions? I'm sure I'm about to get a big bump here. Yeah, Amanda says it's pretty interesting talking about this. I agree. I love talking about non-monogamy. How do you manage cold feet before a wedding? That's a tough one. I don't claim to know. I guess like the question would be like, why do you think that is? Now, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think from what I understand, it's very normal, right? Because you're going into a massive commitment, right? um, marriage is a huge commitment, right? And it's kind of like, all right, we got the wedding invitations out. So you feel this pull towards this thing you committed to, and there's going to be this grand ceremony. And, so there's going to be anxiety there. There's the commitment, there's the event itself. I mean, there's all the pressure, there's all the stress. It's such a build up to this grand event. This is an event you've been maybe looking forward to your whole life, and then again, it's like you start questioning yourself. It's kind of like pre-buyer's remorse. Well, maybe it is like, yeah, it's kind of like this buyer's remorse where it's like you sign the contract, sort of, with the engagement, and now you're like deeply invested, and now like it's about to happen. You're like, whoa, 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 is this what I want to do? But I just think, talk it out with supportive people if you're in therapy. And look, maybe there is a chance, there's always a chance, maybe, and I'm not trying to push you in this direction. I'm just saying, statistically, there is a chance that maybe this isn't the right person and your gut is telling you no. I don't think that's maybe the likely scenario because there's so many other reasons and anxiety. But I think, too, when you have that anxiety, then you start to think, maybe this isn't the right person for me. If I'm having these feelings of anxiety and cold feet for this person I'm supposed to love and be so excited about in this wedding and blah, 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 in this fairy tale, oh my God, maybe they aren't the one if I'm having this feeling. But that's not always the case, right? A lot of times there's other explanations for that. But sometimes maybe that is the case. Do you think the apps are probably the best way to go, especially since COVID? Well, I think it was really interesting too, like at the beginning, where that was basically your only option, right? So it's kind of interesting. It's been like this whole pandemic has been interesting and again, also horrific, but interesting in the fact that, it's like a giant social experiment, right? And, the pandemic in some ways was extremely hard on couples, right? Divorce rates are up. You're stuck at home with your partner and you're driving each other nuts, but you at least have someone, right? You have that intimacy, you have that physical relationship, potentially. So there's advantages and disadvantages to being in a relationship in the pandemic. But I would say the advantages probably outweigh the disadvantages when you compare it to folks who are single. So a lot of folks who are single, and I could speak to this being a single person, during the pandemic and stuff where, it was like super tough for a lot of people because, they're, you weren't getting those needs met. Maybe you weren't anyway as a single person. But, there wasn't that possibility feeling lonely, disconnected, and not just because, of like the sex element or even the dating element, but just feeling isolated if you live at home, alone or whatever. But yeah, especially that romantic element was really tough. So you were kind of confined to the dating apps, but then you had to make that decision of like, okay, do I, take that physical risk and go meet up with someone? And so a lot of people were kind of put in that tough position of like, do I want to be like lonely or do I want to be safe? And those kind of were conflicting elements too. Great question, Haley. Hey, or hey, Kay. One of our longtime friends here at the show. Do you think once a cheater, always a cheater? I don't like those kind of, blanket overall, generalizations like that. Because the simple answer is no. Again, I'm a little more sympathetic towards it because I think monogamy in a lot of cases is an unrealistic expectation. Pure monogamy. Like, now, again, I think it's right for a lot of people, but there's different circumstances in your lives that change. People do grow apart. Partnership is more than just sex. And sometimes, it is difficult because, as you get out of that, they call it the deliverance phase, the new relationship energy, things get real, you have kids, you have struggles in your relationship emotionally, and sometimes, that exciting outside, maybe there's needs that you're not getting met. I've gotten, I don't want to say in trouble, but I've maintained the position that I think sometimes, in very rare cases, cheating could be justified. Now, I love actually getting in fights with people about this. It's kind of funny. I don't ever think it's like the best way to go, but there are some situations where it's like you're almost like backed into a damn corner if you're really being neglected, and divorce is not always easy and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, we shouldn't be cheating. That's, 99% of the time not a good idea. But, monogamy is very difficult. So sometimes people stray, they make mistakes, they get drunk on a trip, and they do, it's a one-off kind of thing. And I don't think it always has to be this nuclear bomb that we make it out to be, And but sometimes, right, it's very clear that, okay, if there's an event of cheating, but then there's all these other toxic situations and abusiveness and manipulation, and they've done it multiple times, yeah, that there is a sign, right? We're having repeat offenses. One time could be a fluke, but 4 times, we have a pretty established pattern here of somebody betraying trust. And that individual either A, shouldn't be dating anybody, or they just shouldn't be monogamous. So a lot of times people do get trapped into the monogamy cycle because that is what is the accepted default for society. And so then people are pressured into that, right? Just like if you went back 30, 40 years ago, like, if you were gay, you just had to marry a woman, right? There was no other alternative. And then it would create all these issues in the relationship because they're gay and with women, or vice versa. Right, and that was kind of the collateral damage. And sometimes, now you could look at that as well, that there's this collateral damage of having monogamy being the one and only default. Again, the way to go for a lot of people. For a lot of people, probably not. So once a cheater, always a cheater. For some people, yes, I want to say, always is a big word. But for some people, cheating is a sign. Right, it's a correlation of, an unhealthy, abusive type element, but it's not always causal. Like a lot of people cheat who are good people, who can get through it. So if anyone has struggled with infidelity in any way, whether it's you being the infidelitous one, I think I just made up a word, one who commits adulterous, or you've experienced a lot of cheating, or you're in a relationship now, in a marriage, and there's been cheating, and it's been hard to get through. Which, I mean, again, I don't want to minimize how devastating that is and that betrayal of trust. But if that is something you've experienced, I would recommend a book by Esther Perel. I'd recommend any of her books. It's called State of Affairs, and it really, really highlights a lot of these points about cheating, about how it doesn't necessarily have to be this, nuclear event that there's no coming back from, that it has to be Armageddon for a relationship. All right. What do you do about hyper-independence that makes you not want to invite anyone else into your life? Asking for a friend. Well, if I was talking to your friend, let me finish off my apple cider on a cold day. So look, any type of extreme, right, there's a reason for it, right? And this is what I've noticed in general. You could look at any personality dynamic, right? When there's an extreme, right, some of it may just be how we're out of the package. But when you get pushed to like a certain extreme of hyper-independence, there's usually something behind that. Maybe there's a fear. Usually it's, let's just say it's often based on an experience. Right, that hyper independence. Now, maybe that's an experience in a relationship, or maybe that's an experience growing up. Right, it's abandonment from a father. Now, a lot of people are hyper independent. Right, they maybe had parents who weren't taking care of their needs. They had to kind of parent themselves. in many ways. They could get pushed to that extreme. Now, some people become codependent and they want to like help and fix everybody, but then some people are just like totally disengaged and or have experienced trauma and they're like, I don't trust anybody, right? So again, it's like, what is the underlying issue behind that hyper independence, and how do you start to work on that and challenge that, and challenge some of those narratives that go through your mind as to why you need to do this, right? And again, building that motivation. Why do I, what is the downside of me continuing to do this, right? And if you're asking the question, there's going to be downsides to taking that approach of any extreme. And there's going to be advantages, right? Being hyper independent, there's advantages, but there's also something you're going to maybe miss out on when you're not letting anyone in. But that's the question, is why aren't you letting anyone in? What are you afraid of? Figure out the answer there, and that'll take you down the path you need to go to changing that type of mindset. My current partner is great, but does that say straying is most past relationships? Should I be worried? Okay, that's interesting. Well, I think it's one of those things that's like, you should probably take note of, right? And they were honest about that. And I'm curious as to what they would say why that was, So I think it's kind of harder to cheat nowadays because it's like you have a paper trail. And by paper, I mean like electronic trail of like everything you're doing. And sometimes it's like, I don't know, kind of obvious, but anyway, I mean, people still cheat and get away with it for a certain amount of time. Usually cat comes out of the bag eventually, but yeah, I mean, that's something to take note of. Again, we talked about that before of like sometimes things are a 1-off, a 2-off, but a 4-off, right? We're talking about an established pattern. And again, like, so people ask all the time, like, do people change? Right? We were talking about this earlier about people who have criminal histories. When do you disclose? But people, and again, I'm biased. I'm a therapist. I better believe that people can change. But what I have seen is that people can change, but there needs to be a significant amount of work done. People don't change by osmosis. And what you see in the abusive dynamics is, oh my God, I'll change, right? And they start taking some action, but then once the heat's off their ass and then you're back in that same dynamic, they go back to how it was before, right? And when you start to continuing to see that with a lot of talk not followed by action, and by action I mean like seriously doing some like deep work, to make changes. Like that's a question, is like, what could, someone with a cheating past history, what could they do to make themselves not, out of that unhealthy mindset, right? Therapy. Okay, have they done therapy? Maturity. What are their life experience? If they're like, yeah, I cheated on my exes, and you're like 22. It's like, well, I was in high school and it's like, okay, like people change naturally and become more mature. But there's a lot of reasons for it besides they're just like a hopeless like dickhead. Hi Evan, I run a substance abuse mental health facility in Mexico, and oh, that's awesome. You love my content? You guys watch it at treatment? That's so cool. I love to hear that. I'm going to be going to Mexico. My friend said that he's going to have his wedding celebration in Chihuahua. So I have an open invite for October. So I'll be coming down to Mexico. Where in Mexico are you at? And tell your clients I say what's up, and I'm proud of them for being in treatment and doing the hard work. I have been there. I've been on both sides of it. So tell them I say what's up. Shout out to my homies in Mexican treatment. Okay, so speaking of the devil, I'm excited to go to Chihuahua too because they have my favorite cheese. If you've never had Chihuahua cheese, it is probably the best cheese I've ever had. Dealing with drug and gambling addiction in a marriage. Okay, this is a tough one. It's extremely complicated, right? And it's a very blanket kind of statement. Okay, I'm dealing with with cheating and gambling. No, not cheating, but drug addiction and gambling. Now, gambling is tough. Gambling is one of the like hardest addictions. Probably one of the most like viral posts I've ever had was one that I referenced gambling addiction and just like really, really difficult addictions to, overcome. And gambling is one of those. And gambling, I mean, screws up relationships to a level that I think makes alcohol and drugs jealous. To be tongue in cheek about it, but like for whatever reason, what the changes gambling makes to your brain for not even being a substance is unbelievable. A, B, pardon me. We're talking finances, and finances in general are one of the most contested or most contentious issues in a marriage. Disagreements on finances. Okay, so imagine that, and then having your husband come home and blow away your mortgage payment or your whole entire house on slot machines, right? I mean, so I think just like any other relationship, if that person is unhealthy, you don't have the obligation to be dragged through that situation, right? You could give someone chances. I mean, you're married, but again, it's just like the cheating kind of thing, right? So maybe someone who struggles with impulsiveness, giving them the opportunity to take action, just like I don't want to say the cheater because, again, I think that's a loaded term and a label, but giving them the opportunity to take action. But if that individual is like chronically relapsing and they're not going to treatment, I think it's okay to, throw some boundaries down and be like, hey, I'm going to be staying with my sister or my whoever, and we're going to be looking at separation if you aren't healthy, because, you don't want to get dragged through the mud on that situation. And sometimes it is that level of consequences that will prompt someone to eventually get help. But when you're constantly making veiled threats and, you keep taking them back and, you allow it to happen, then sometimes the behavior then doesn't stop. So what else? You had a manic episode and lost touch with reality. My boyfriend and his family hate me now. Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, having a manic episode, you're not yourself, or you are yourself, but on, caffeine and steroids, right? And you do things that are impulsive and, things that you regret later. It's kind of like, being like a manic episode. It's like being blackout drunk, and then you wake up and you're like, okay, what damage did I do this time? Except the whole time you're like painfully aware of what you're doing. You just don't have the impulse control, and you're just not in your right headspace, right? So that's a bummer. You say your boyfriend hates you. I mean, so this must have like just happened. What was it? I mean, I'm curious. Like, what was it that really, what were the behaviors or the actions you took that really kind of threw that in? But I've had a lot of clients with that who have like severe mania, and then the family sees it. And I mean, because like when you're in a manic episode, you could really do some serious damage depending. So let's see who else. Oh, you translate. Okay, hold on. Let me get back a little bit here. So we talked about that, drug and alcohol addiction, the manic episode. Thanks for sharing the live. Translate for your patients. We'll translate to them. My respect for what they're doing in treatment in Mexico. Let's see. Me and my girlfriend are both in school for LPC MSW. Have you heard of this working out? Look, I think of course it could work out, but it's tough. I mean, there's kind of like a joke among like grad school being a relationship killer, right? Because you're so it's like kind of one of the times you're like busiest in life. If you're working full time doing grad school, and but I think the advantage here at least is you two are doing about the same damn thing. Right? You're both, so you should hopefully have more of an understanding and empathy for each other, because I think a lot of the times what happens in the grad school relationship killer, is that one partner, feels neglected by that one who is in grad school, there's a whole bunch of issues. But again, it's like any relationship, if you put stress on it, the more likely it is to crack. And so, grad school could be a very big stressor. Absolutely. So, but yeah, I have a good feeling about you two. I don't know why, but I got a good feeling you got a good foundation, you got a lot in common, you're going for the same thing. So hopefully you develop that understanding. You give each other a little leeway for this couple years. While you're doing grad school, you're probably in an internship, and it's just a lot. So give each other a break, and you guys will be just fine. I have a good feeling about it. Let me know in a couple years and send me a wedding invite. Probably won't come, but I appreciate the gesture. Why is gambling so difficult to overcome? Is it from the brain's reward system? Yeah, I mean, there's a very big part of the brain's reward circuitry with gambling. Again, it's like these slot machines. I always like reference slot machines because those are the worst. Like, those are literally the devil. Like, I'm not like that's the devil, but like, those are the fucking devil. Like, I don't believe in a devil, but if there was a devil, he'd be making slot machines. They just, again, we were talking about this at the very beginning about that like the intermittent reinforcement, kind of like using that in a manipulative kind of way. But it's it's kind of the same pattern as a slot machine, right? So that's why it is hard. It does like really rewire your brain circuitry, and it makes it very, very addictive in so many ways. Let them know we're in Monterey. Awesome. Next time I'm in Monterey, we'll stop by treatment. Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna probably, like, we're kind of getting bumping here. We'll do a couple more questions. Let's see. Can asexuality be a byproduct of ASPD? So asexuality and ASPD. I like this question because it's two interesting things, right? ASPD, antisocial personality disorder, right? Which is a personality disorder, associated with extreme lacks of empathy, criminal type behavior, right? Like sociopathy, criminal mindedness, right? And usually folks with ASPD are hypersexual, right? And again, like, the human psyche is very complicated, and it is possible to be asexual. You could be more than one thing, and they may not necessarily tie together in the same circuit. However, there are, correlators and patterns, and with ASPD, it tends to be the opposite, right? It tends to be hypersexual. So I don't know if those two would be related. What's the best genre of gift for Valentine's Day if your goal is not to be practical? 20. Yes, you want to shake it up. Well, that's tough. It's like, I got to know your partner. It's like, what do they like? What are they into, right? But yeah, I think like partners, appreciate creativity and thought, right? It doesn't have to be the most expensive thing, but something based on, the quintessential, the first time we met, so think of something unique, think of something special, something meaningful that you two share together, or something that that they're just like something that they love that they don't always get the opportunity to do. So something that really makes them feel special. But I can't say for sure. I guess you just asked the category, but I would say that. How do I stop being a people pleaser? That's a tough one. Well, again, there's always something underlying there, right? Any extreme type of behavior, right? Like chronic people pleasing. But it's, there's usually something under that, right? A negative experience that you've had, or something in a relationship where you feel the need to people please. Maybe it's an underlying insecurity, feeling like you need that validation. If someone's mad at you, then you take that as, I'm a bad person, so you therefore avoid that, right? So that may be just an example of something that's under that. So, again, I'm biased because I'm a therapist, but maybe doing therapy around that. What is that underlying insecurity reason that, by not giving in to, or constantly people pleasing, or neglecting your own needs. Sometimes people neglect their own needs, like from a very, very deep, deep feeling of, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve this, so I have to keep helping everybody else. So figuring out that underlying issue and then start to take that contrary action slowly but surely and get desensitized to taking care of yourself. All right. So now is time. We're going to do this for 5 minutes. We are going to do our fun bad advice part of the show. So bad advice for the next 5 minutes. So remember, only ask me a question now if you want bad advice. Now, before we go into this, you must understand that this is bad advice. You should not do what I'm going to tell you unless you want bad things to happen. And if that is the case, then you should follow this advice because it likely will lead to bad things. Every once in a while, I'll give the bad advice where I'm like, actually, maybe that wouldn't be the worst idea. But this is bad advice, and if something does go wrong, you can't blame me because I told you it would go wrong. All right, so from here on out, I'm going to be giving bad advice. How do I get internet strangers to notice me? Oh, very simple. Just wear less clothes. That's it, in your pictures. They'll notice you pretty quick, Miss Jessica. Jessica's one of our best friends here at the show. So yeah, just do that, and that should work just fine. Again, this is bad advice. Do not follow this advice or bad things may happen. All right, what else? I have ADHD. How can I be more productive at work? Okay. Are you asking Kayla? You tagged her. And again, this is bad advice because we are doing bad advice right now. How can you be more productive at work with ADHD? I would recommend just having other people do the work for you and taking credit for it. So finding ways to get other people to do the work for you, whether it's manipulation, it doesn't matter. Just make sure other people do the work for you, and then just don't do anything to correct the behavior on your own and try to be more productive. There's no point. All right, bad advice. Remember, do not follow this advice. If you do, bad things will happen, and I'm not liable. Any more people wanting bad advice? This is the end of the show where we are going to go out with a bang. We're a little over an hour here. I think we're about an hour, 10 minutes. Does anyone else want bad advice? Oh no, tarot cards. We're not going to get into that. Bad experiences. All right, come on. Someone's got a question. Should I tell my husband about my Amazon purchases? Absolutely not. I would absolutely not tell your husband about the Amazon purchases. I would probably take out another credit card that he doesn't know about and just keep doing it and just wait until it all comes crashing down. Maybe send the bills to a P.O. box or something like that so he doesn't know. Sign up with an alternative email he doesn't know about and just keep buying shit and just do whatever feels good. That's usually the underlying theme of my bad advice section is just do whatever feels good in the moment and do not think twice about it. Again, this is bad advice. This is just a joke. Do not follow this advice or bad things will happen, and I'm not liable because I just told you that. All right, good stuff. Let's see, any other... Oh, here's a good one. Tips for choosing a therapist. Here's what you do. Just find a bunch of therapists who have openings, and then take their picture and put it on a dartboard, and then close your eyes and just throw it, and whoever it hits, that's who you're going to. No questions asked. Doesn't matter if they're a good fit. It doesn't matter if, they even have a license. Oh my God, I have a better one. Oh God, I don't know why I didn't think of this. I got a way better piece of bad advice for finding a therapist. Okay, this is so good. All right. We're doing bad advice again, Jennifer, one of our friends, Jiu-Jitsu Jennifer's here, and we're at the end of the show, so we're going to do bad advice. Again, this is bad advice. Do not follow this advice. If you do follow this advice, bad things will happen. And I'm not liable because I just told you that. All right, so here's what you do to find the best therapist here. Go to your state's board, right, whether it's a social work board, psychology board, and go to the disciplinary section. Right? And find therapists who have complaints against them and try to find a therapist who has some of the most egregious complaints but still has a license. because believe it or not, even though therapists are under like a very strict code, it's kind of shocking what you can get away with and still have a license. And I didn't know that until I started reading some of these complaints, and I'm like, holy shit, I cannot believe this person is still licensed. So that's good news for you. If you want to find good therapist, go to the board, your local board, and look at the disciplinary section and find the person with the most disciplinary actions and the sketchiest shit and go see them. Hey, they may be good. I don't know. Again, this is bad therapy advice. This is a joke. Do not follow this advice. If you do, bad things will happen, and I'm not liable because I just told you. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. You should do that. If you're ever bored, go to your state's board and read some of the complaints and just, because it's all public record. So you could see some sketchy shit. Oh, Jeff, I'm attracted to my therapist. Should I make a move? Jeff, I don't know if you've seen the movie Step Brothers, but, when Will Ferrell's character, when he's in his first therapy session, he confesses his love and is just super creepy. But I think you should just do that. Just go right for it. Don't worry about tact. Just put all your feelings out there right away. The segment needs its own time. Do you think maybe I should do a whole hour of this segment? How's Bella? Bella, how you doing over there? She's good, but she has a bad rash. She gets this rash on her inner thigh, and it happens at least once a year. Oh my God, it's our basic starter kit. Yes, one of my favorites on TikTok. When will you find love? All right, so again, this is bad therapy advice section. Do not follow this advice or bad things will happen. But if you want bad things to happen, follow this advice. So our friend, the basic starter kit, if you want to find love, what should you do? The first thing I'd recommend you doing is lower your standards. And not only just lower them, throw them out the window. Because think about it, the reason it's hard to find someone is because you have standards. There are always going to be people who like you and want to date you, but you're not with them. Why are you not with them? Because you have standards. Your standards are getting in the way of you finding love, basic starter kit. The Venus flytrap. How appropriate with love. That's so appropriate. You got an inner thigh rash too. Well, as a medical doctor, you should maybe know what to do, but maybe not. So, anyway, yeah, my friend, the basic starter kit, my friend, you should lower all your standards and just take whoever, the next person who expresses any interest in you, just lock them down and probably just marry them. Again, this is bad therapy advice. This is a joke. Do not follow this advice. If you do follow this advice, bad things will happen. No music. No, so I'm actually recording this. Well, actually, it's always being recorded. But I'm actually going to put this up on YouTube. So if you want to see the whole segment, this will be on YouTube, and we'll make it part of the podcast. I figure if I'm going to do these lives, we may as well record them and repurpose them for something. So if you didn't catch the whole thing, you will be able to. So go follow me on YouTube. Go follow my podcast. And if you do, I will give away free stuff. I always do a giveaway that if you subscribe to any of my other podcasts, then I will send you some free material, some free therapy guides I do with clients that you may find to be of benefit. So just shoot me an email. Let me know you sub to any of those other. They're all in the link tree in my bio. I'll send those over. Where am I located? Oh, I didn't know you didn't know. I'm in the Canada of the U.S. So I know you're up in Toronto, but I'm in Minneapolis, which may be of further northern latitude than you. It's kind of interesting. I never realized this, but I saw a post on this that most of the population of Canada lives below the lowest or lives below the highest latitude of the U.S. So most people in Canada actually live lower than part of the U.S. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, I didn't know you didn't know. I thought we were besties, man. I know where you live. How come you don't know where I live? Minneapolis, Minnesota. I think 9% of Canadian population live within 50 miles of the border. Yeah, for sure. It's kind of crazy. Canada's so damn massive, but so small. I had another follower for a long time who was always in the lives, and he was a doctor up in Canada too. And It was pretty interesting. Learned a lot from him. But yeah, I think he was finishing his residency as well. Gerald, I hope he's doing well. We haven't seen him in a while. That's what kind of happens on these, like on lives. You'll see, but Jessica's really consistent for a very long time. But people come for a while, go, and then they come back. And I think it's because people burn out on TikTok. Like they'll come on TikTok and it'll just kind of ruin their lives for like 3 months because they're just on it all the time, and then they burn out, and then they like throw their phone away. And then we'll see them later. They always come back. Sarah Shapiro in the house, another fan favorite. All right, we'll do one more bad therapy advice, and then I'm out of here. One more question, and we'll dip out. You're a little late, but hey, you came in at the best part. You forgot to check if I'm live. Well, you could always set notifications. Should I take 24 grand I got saved in a lockbox and pull a Gone Girl? I think you already know the answer to that question. Absolutely. But again, you have to ask yourself, and this is a perfect thing to go off of, right? The whole theme of the bad advice segment is what you always want to ask yourself is what feels good right now. Not in 10 minutes, not in a year, not in a week. What feels good right now? And do it. And don't think about the consequences. Do not think about them, because the consequences are something that happens in the future, right? But we're not in the future. So live in the moment and do whatever feels good, and don't think about the consequences. All right. Again, folks, for just joining, that is bad advice. This is just a joke. If you follow any of the advice in this segment, bad things will probably happen. And if you don't want that to happen, don't follow this advice. And I'm not liable because I told you so. All right, everyone. This has been awesome. This has been fun. I'm definitely going to do this again. I think maybe, what do you guys think? What do you think of this segment? So this was, I've always wanted to do a little love line, but this is a good opportunity to do it. So I think we should do this again. This has been fun. You all had some really good questions. And maybe once a week we'll do this. You want more juice on me? Well, you'll have to tune back next time. So for those of you folks, if you have enjoyed yourself, well, set a live notification. I believe you can do that, and it will notify you next time I'm live. And maybe next week we will do another episode of TikTok Love Line. And if you've been tuning in for a little bit and you're enjoying this, we will post this. When will it get posted? I think by the end of the week. I just posted my last, again, for those of you who missed it, I posted yesterday. I put on YouTube today the last podcast, Evan the Counselor Live. So go subscribe to the podcast, and this will be part of that podcast. So for those of you live, go subscribe. And if you're listening on the podcast and you haven't subscribed to YouTube or my Insta, go do that. Or here, maybe you found me not on TikTok. So yeah, I will post this. This one will be really easy to post. So it won't be too hard to post this. I don't have to do a ton of editing or anything. So it'll be pretty easy. So we'll get that up this week for you. And if you subscribe to the podcast, you will know, or my YouTube, it will give you a notification. It'll let you know when this thing is posted. And you could watch the whole 1.5 hour episode. I said I was going to go for an hour, went for 1.5 hours. And that's just kind of my MO. I always go longer than I thought because this is fun and I love you beautiful people. So on that, I'm going to dip and bid you adieu. And until next time, we will see you on the TikTok Love Line. All right, everyone. Peace out.